You ready, Betty? Okay. All right. Well, let's open with prayer. My throat is really dry tonight, so I may have to keep. Anyway, let's open with prayer, then we'll get started. Father, we just thank you so much for the time that you give us together. We thank you for the opportunity of having a place together and it being we can freely open and openly worship you. God, we just ask that you would bless our time together tonight, and just as we open your word, let it honor you and fill our hearts with your love and the knowledge and wisdom that only you can give us. And God, we just ask that you would just uh, open our hearts to your truth and help us just to fall in love with you deeper. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. So let's look at our practice stuff for last week. Did anybody pick some? And I just kind of put some different stories of Joseph in here. Did anybody do one? Did you do one, Martha? What'd you do? Or did you do all of them? No, Martha, you did all of them. Mm, there you go. Yeah, thanks. I forgot to.
I didn't do all of them, but I was having a hard enough time just doing one because I get so wordy. Feature that. So I did the Joseph Rises to Power,
Oh,
Genesis
good.
41.
Okay. You wanna give us
And if
a
we're
brief?
going to go along the format, the setting, well, the obvious it's in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
but I chose that to look at the Pharaoh's mind's eye
Oh, that's neat.
when he with his two dreams,
Uh-huh.
and with those two dreams of the cows and the ears of grain, that that's that's God's working.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that that's His working in Pharaoh without him ever knowing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That God can use anybody, no matter whether they're
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
And so I was thinking
That's good.
that was what he was doing at that point. And the conflict and the rising and falling of everything was uh, that Joseph, because he was in the dungeon, he was called back
Mm-hmm.
by the and by the Pharaoh to interpret the dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph did say, this is not my interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
this is God's interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave it, and the Pharaoh was very pleased with that response. And so so the the let's see, we have the characters. Well, it's Joseph. Above all, it's God,
Yeah.
and it's Joseph and the Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
Even the wine taster
Yeah.
had a role in that, and
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that this area, that's where the solving of the Pharaoh's dream, the dream conflict, and that was he didn't totally understand it, but after Joseph interpreted the 7 years of greatness,
Mm-hmm.
7 years of famine.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, the Pharaoh gives Joseph becomes, I'm going to say, second in command.
Yeah.
And with that comes he such wisdom and knowledge that God gave him to handle this situation to where it's not only benefiting Egypt, but it's also benefiting Israel,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and the lineage
Mm-hmm.
as it goes. Then the oh, I have so many notes. I do. What's
You
next?
just come up here
I
and just
am I am all over the place. So that okay, I get it. The let's go to. I had these numbered. Okay, the theme is the last thing I want to say. Oh, the mood.
yes.
This I found so enlightening. When Joseph got married, he had two sons. And those sons, and pronouncing those names may be very difficult for me, but Manasseh and Ephraim, well, because of their names, and it's in verses 51 and 52 of chapter 41, and it says that, I'll find it. Okay. For he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. That's the name that he gave Manasseh. And for Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. That I felt was the mood, but ultimately it became the theme of God's grace
Yeah.
and loving kindness and Joseph's faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm done for the evening.
That's good. I like that. Thank you. I love how God gives everybody just unique insights into things. So that is so. Okay, do that. Sounds good to me. I like it. That's really good. You know, I had read that about the names, but I hadn't really looked that closely at it. But I like that how one is the past and one is the the future or the present and and that that's really neat. I like that. Anybody else do a different one or anybody have anything else they want to share? Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on to the life of Moses and Aaron. And if you look at it looks like we're going through a lot. We are going through a lot. There's a lot in Genesis. It took us we did 2 weeks, I guess, pretty much going through very fast on Abraham and then Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. But this is Moses and Aaron, and this pretty much goes through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. so, so, but a lot of it is, the laws. We're not going to go through all the laws and all the regulations and all the details of the construction of the temple, and things like that. So you'll see we just I'm focusing on more like the people and the things that happened with the people. So, okay. So, if we start with Exodus 1, so we ended ended Genesis last week, and there's so much in Genesis. I never, until I really have studied it, realized how much is in Genesis. There's just so much. Okay, so it starts with Exodus 1, and actually the first part talks about those who went to Egypt. So this is the story of how the Israelites ended up in Egypt, how they ended up in slavery. So this is all we know now how they got there. I mean, that's what we went through in Genesis. So now they're in Egypt, and they came there for a good reason, right? There was a famine, so they needed food. But they end up, over the years, increasing, which God told them to, and this was a good thing for them. They increased so much that then it caused fear in Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and they ended up being in slavery and being oppressed. So, okay. So if you look at verse 8, to me that's a really telling. So Exodus 1:8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So that tells you right there. And I heard somebody, I don't remember who it was. I've heard somebody teach on this, and they said, okay, how many of you remember how many of you know your parents' names? Okay, yeah, most of us do. And grandparents, most of us, and great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents. And we start getting back, and you think it doesn't take many generations before we don't even know our own great-great-great-grandparents. And so you think, it seems to us, because we just came out of reading, as the reader, it seems like we just came out of reading this story. How could you forget Joseph? But it doesn't take long for generations to start forgetting. So there was a new king who did not know Joseph, and so that implies also he didn't know all the things that God had done and giving God credit for things. So, okay, so on our outline here, we've got, so Joseph's family stays in Egypt and increases, and then they're oppressed by a new king, and then in Exodus, toward the end of Exodus 1, or middle to end, Pharaoh orders to kill all the Hebrew boys at birth. But what happens? The midwives, at first, they don't, right? They don't follow the order that he orders them to. This is Exodus 1, it starts with 15, I think. Is it 115? Yeah. So, yeah, 115. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, of whom was named, okay, I'm not going to do names either. So, when you serve as midwife, uh, if it's a son, you shall kill him, but if it's a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? Let the male children let the male children live. The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and essentially give birth before we get there. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. Um, so anyway, he gave them families, but Pharaoh still commands the people then. So he doesn't just trust the midwives anymore. He says now, he commands all his people. Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So that's how we end up with Moses' story, right? We know, most of us know, if you've studied the Bible, you know the story, but not everybody has. So I don't want to make those assumptions. But okay, so that leads up to the birth and adoption of Moses, which starts in Exodus 2. And Moses is a descendant from Levi. We talked about that a little bit last week on that one sheet that we have of the tribes of Levi, of tribes of Israel. So what happens with Moses? His mom puts him in a basket, puts him in the water. Yeah. And his sister Miriam, we know from later his sister is Miriam, or if he only had the one sister, it could be another one, but I don't think so. That she watches over him, and then, and luck would have it. Is it luck? It's not luck, right? It's as God would have it. He protects Moses by having the Pharaoh's daughter, when she finds him, then Miriam is there and says, "Oh, do you want me to get one of the midwives, one of the Hebrew women, to nurse him?" And so he gets to go back and live with his mother then for a few years. So, okay, but then he is adopted essentially by Pharaoh's daughter. So then we move on. His boyhood grows up real quick, I guess, because the next thing we know, he is a young man and he kills an Egyptian. He sees one mistreating he knows he's a Hebrew. He sees them mistreating the people, his own people. So he flees to Midian, where he marries Zipporah and has a son named Gershom. And then we see, wait a minute. Is this the right? Oh, there. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. If it's lit, it's muted. If it's not lit, it's
So
unmuted.
how did Moses know he was Hebrew? Because he lived with his mother and she
That's the only thing I can
taught
guess.
him?
I wonder, yeah. Because it says it says
It just
he,
says when he was older.
right,
You
it
don't know
says he
how
when
old.
it's older, and where's let's see, it's 2:11, yeah. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people. So that makes me think he knows his people. He knows that and looked on their burdens and saw an Egyptian, being a Hebrew, one of his people, says that again. He looked this way and that, seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian. So yeah, I would assume that it's from. I haven't really looked up what scholars would say. If there's probably some other history somewhere that might tell something, but yeah, we don't know how. I don't know how old he was. I don't think it says, does it? When the child grew older, verse 10, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. So yeah, we don't know how old he was, but yeah. So we go straight through from. There's a little some blank in there on his growing up years, but yeah. So somehow he knows, though. I think that's his people. So then, okay. So then the Israelites they're in slavery. So right there at the end of verse 2, God hears their groaning, and God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. I love that very last verse of 2. I love that. So God does not. He never leaves us. He can allow things to happen, but he's never going to leave us. Okay, so then the burning bush, and let's see. I put God meets Moses in the burning bush, and then he gives him the signs, the turning his staff into a snake. Yep. And then anyway, yeah. So he gives him those signs, and then Moses, and he tells him to deliver Israel. So he tells him, "You're going to be the one." Of course, we also know Moses is, has all these excuses, right? I don't speak well. I don't. So he eventually, I think I'm getting ahead of myself though, but eventually he sends Aaron. He tells him, "No, I'm not. This is the same. This is the same chapter." Um, so anyway, eventually he sends Aaron to help him. Says Aaron can speak for you. So then he returns to Egypt and he visits Pharaoh and tells him what God told him, which Pharaoh doesn't like, that he's going to take the Israelites out of Egypt. So Pharaoh makes it harder on the Israelites, it's a harsher labor. He tells them to, he says he's not going to provide the straw, I think, for the bricks. They have to go out and gather it themselves, but they're still going to have the same quota. So he makes their work a lot harder. So they're kind of saying, "Thanks a lot, Moses," but they don't. We can see the big picture. We know the whole story. They didn't at the time. Were you gonna? Oh, I know.
How many times did Pharaoh say no to Moses?
I have not counted. We know the 9 times on the plague. I mean, it's a lot. Yeah. And how many times he also says, "Okay, okay," and then changes his mind. Yeah, but I don't know exactly how many. That's a good question. We know at least the 9 because there were 10 plagues, and the final one he did let him go. But then he sort of changes his mind after that because he still goes and pursues them, right? Which, yeah. So I don't know. That's a good question. Well, I'll try to look through here and see, and just count. Yeah. Okay. So, and God promises deliverance. Chapter 6. Then chapter 6 goes on. Oh, hang on, one thing. I love in chapter 6, verse 6, actually, where God's telling Moses, "Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. And let's see, I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I'm the Lord your God who has brought you out from under the burden of the Egyptians." I love all the "I wills" and the "I am," that he will bring us, he will deliver us, he will redeem us, he will take us to be his people, and he will be our God. I love personalizing that. So exactly. Yeah. And so many times he says, when he does stuff throughout the Old Testament, but he does stuff or even in this one, "I'm doing this so the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord," that he does things so everybody will see, that who he is and his glory. But he still gives us free will that we can reject that even when we see it. Okay, so then the 10 plagues. And I'm just going to go through it as the 10 plagues. So I think we're not going to go through each one just for time's sake. But it is interesting if you go through some of the things and start looking for some symbolism of, like, I'm saying this, but I didn't write it down. But there was something that occurred to me when I was looking at this. And it had to do with like so many days of different, a lot of things are in like 3 days. And things like that, and the symbolism of Christ with Christ, and so it's really neat to go through those and look at it that way, also. Okay, so there's the 10 plagues, but the 10th one is the Passover, right? The 10th one is the okay. So it starts in chapter 11 where God tells him it says the final plague threatened, but God tells him in chapter 11 of Exodus. About the plague, and then the Passover, actually in more detail in 12. So it goes through all that. Now let's see, the practice that I have for this week is going to be over the Passover, the Exodus 12. So if you want to look, I put it in the same thing as the storyline, but I did change the bottom one. Instead of the theme or the application, I put symbolism because I just love, and like I could just talking about that Steve calls it prophetic symbolism. I was talking to him about it, he's like, "I call that," and I said, "Oh, I like that term." So I don't know if that's an official term, but that's what I used. But the prophetic symbolism in the Passover that points to Jesus. and since we know that on the other side and how that shows Jesus. So that's what I put for the bottom one, and I started to make that the whole thing. But if you want to do it that way, but I just love going through that and seeing so much of how so many things point to Jesus. But yes,
We have a friend that she's Jewish, and we were talking. And what is that called? I think it starts with an S. The whole ritual that they have for Passover. I think
oh
it starts. It's see, yes,
yeah,
that's it.
Seder or yeah,
Yes,
I
and
think it is. I'm not real familiar.
she went through that whole thing with us, and so and of course we've never said, you know, would you do this with us? And take us through all this the
Mm-hmm.
symbolic meaning and everything. So it was really interesting how
That's really.
just how even with your friends that you don't really
Mm-hmm.
you don't see that side of them
Mm-hmm.
every day, and then
Yeah.
to have that to help you understand. She's the one that I've also called to send me the Judaism 101.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's neat because I think so many times we do kind of throw out the just because in generally I guess stereotype whatever, but generally Jewish people do not believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Some do, but generally that's so. I think sometimes as Christians, we kind of throw out, especially Christians in this country and in this culture, we tend to just throw out the whole Jewish, belief system. And it's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, kind of thing that there's so much of our biblical history that is in that it's just beautiful. Yeah. Yes. I know. I know. Yeah, we've talked about names in here some, how different cultures and different countries have such different names, and so many of the names we see in the Bible, even that repeat, that I'll go now. Was this the same one that was back? Was this the same guy they're talking about? But yeah, that's neat. So the Passover does. Yeah, the Passover is a. I know there are a lot of things that the Jewish people do that are very specific, and I have not studied that as much, but it'd be beautiful to study. Okay, so then the Passover goes through talking about the how the angel of death then will pass over the Israelites' house that put the blood on their doorposts, and then the Exodus. Yeah, the Exodus. They actually leave there in chapter 12, and then the end of chapter 12. The Lord says, "This is the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the statute of the Passover," and it goes through some. No foreigner shall eat of it. And goes through some rules, regulations of it there. So he institutes this as to be a perpetual thing for generations to come to do. One thing I think is, and like I said, I keep thinking of the symbolism on this. This was on my mind this week, I guess, as I was going through it. But how it says that, okay, back to verse 43 in 12, Exodus 12. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the statute of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat of it, but every slave that is bought for money may eat of it after you have circumcised him. No foreigner or hired worker may eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take." Anyway, it goes on. But I thought the fact that they've bought, someone that's bought can then partake. And I thought how Christ bought us with his sacrifice, and how only because of that, because we were foreigners, we're not, literally from the line of Abraham. And even then, you still, that's not an automatic, you still have to believe. But I love that symbolism in that too, that if they're bought if they're purchased, and Christ purchased us to be able to partake of that, I guess, if you would put it that way. So anyway, okay, so let's see. Then I did put in there, because we talked about this last week, that Moses takes Joseph's bones out of Egypt, because we talked about that back in Genesis where he promised him to, and we see these things fulfilled. So he takes his bones out of Egypt at the Exodus. Then God guides by pillars of cloud and fire. And I think it's one of those things, and that's what this whole Bible study a lot is about, is those stories we heard, but how do they fit together? All those of things. So this is where he leads them through the wilderness with the pillar of cloud which I guess, I don't know, when I think of a pillar of a cloud, I think of like a tornado or something, but I don't know why. That's just Texas, I guess, thought, but but I don't think of it's not. Oh, yes, you have to do that or they can't hear. Sorry.
I thought the symbolism that I got from the pillar of clouds is that he's protecting them from the sun during the day. And then at
Oh,
night, with the fire,
fire
he
for war.
lights their way.
Well, that's probably been obvious to everybody else but me. I like that. Thank you. That's, thank you. I like that. That makes perfect sense. Well, yeah, and also, when he's on the mountain and the cloud comes down, it's such a physical, tangible type, sign that they can see where God is there and where he's not.
A question. Did he not have that with, they were carrying the tabernacle too. Is this the same place or is this
They haven't made the
they
tabernacle
haven't
yet.
made the tabernacle
I don't think they've
yet.
made the they keep like they'll stop and build an altar, but they have not created the tabernacle
Okay.
yet. As far as if I've got everything straight, they have not created the tabernacle yet. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Did we? I think the golden calf is in here. Did I not put Yeah, it's down there. Okay, yeah, okay. So then they cross the Red Sea, and we know what happens there too. That's where Pharaoh changes his mind and goes after him, and God parts the seas, and they cross on dry land. Which, if you think about
The
that,
other thing to remember is they don't have the Ark of the Covenant yet because he doesn't have the tablets, the
Right.
Ten Commandments yet.
yes,
At
yeah.
this point.
Yeah, doesn't the manna hasn't even been sent yet? Yeah.
So once
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
they get that, then they put the tablets in the Ark of
Yeah.
the Covenant.
Yeah, yeah,
To move it
yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah. So they have the staff, which eventually goes into the Ark of the Covenant, but it's being used right now. It's it's what he used. They used for the plagues where they stretched him out over the sea. I think that was either his staff or his hand, but some of them. Some of the plagues, he stretched out the staff, and I'm getting mixed up on which ones are which. But yeah, he's used the staff, so that will end up going. We'll have that. We'll see that a little bit later. Yeah, so they cross the Red Sea, and we know that God parts it. They cross on dry land, which to me is amazing. That it's not just parting the Red Sea; it's drying up the mud too. It's so. But I think if we can believe he can part the sea, why can't we believe that he can, dry the ground? But yeah, the fact that they crossed on dry ground, and then the he covers the Egyptians back up and drowns all them after and I think somewhere. I hate this when I think of something and I just start talking about it because then I'm committed to trying to remember what it was. But I think Steve was telling me one time, somewhere I heard that they had done some some research where they've gone down now and dove and they have found like the gold chariot wheels and some things. I think I read that, but don't hold me to it. Somewhere something is in my memory. I want to look that back up and see if I can find where that was because I think I heard that those have been found. So it's cool to see the proof of things. I'll look it up. Like I said, I hate something just comes off the top of my head and I start talking about it and then I think, oh, maybe I may not remember this right. Yeah. 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 Okay, so then let's see. I'm ahead of myself. Manna, so 16. Okay. Well, no, I didn't put this on the list, but at the end of 15 is where they don't have water. So there's 3 times, and if you think of all the stories, there's 3 times the Israelites don't have water, and God gets them water out of something. Well, this time it's bitter water, and they can't drink it. So He shows Moses a log, and He has them throw the log in the water, and the water's become sweet, and they can drink it. And then we've got another time that there's water out of a rock that He tells Moses to strike, and we'll get to that. And that's okay, because the water does come out. The third time He tells Moses to just speak to the rock, but Moses strikes it in his anger, and it says in his anger. And so that's why that's one of those things. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I get these things confused. And so that's one of the purposes of me also in doing this study is saying, okay, I want to get this straight. There's not, there is a time he struck the rock, and that was okay because God told him to do it that way. But the time that he struck the rock that God told him to speak to it was very important that he disobeyed, and it says it was in his anger too. So we'll get there. But I want to point out this is the first time of the waters that God makes the waters drinkable, but it's through showing Moses a log that he throws in and makes it drinkable. So, okay, 16 is where he starts sending the manna. Now, he sends quail first, so he gives them some meat to stave off their years of having only manna. And it doesn't even call it manna until verse 31. It describes it as bread, as like flakes of, does it say flakes of bread? Flakes of something. Anyway, and so they kind of melt when the dew comes up. They're only there during, they're only supposed to take as much for one day. Thank you. Yes, they're only supposed to take as much for one day. And we find out that some test that and try, and it gets moldy, and so they try to keep it till the next day, except for on the Sabbath. They're not supposed to gather it. So the day before the Sabbath, they gather enough for 2 days, and God has that not turn moldy. So that's where the manna comes in. Then verse 17 is the water from the rock, and that's where he strikes the rock, and it's okay to strike the rock because God tells him to do it. And then Israel defeats, and here I go with names again, Amalek, I guess. And this is important because this is the story, if you've heard it, where Moses and Hur Aaron and Hur hold Moses' hands up because they get tired because they're winning while his hands are up. And when his hands get tired, they start losing. The Israelites start losing the battle. So I love this whole idea of friendship and just helping and carrying each other's burdens, and that whole lesson from this. This is where that is, and it's with Israel defeats Amalek, however you say this. And then I love also that, like verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek. And we hear so many times God telling him to write things down, and we see toward the end of, I guess it's Deuteronomy, where he's written, all this stuff. We know that, we know we have his word, but to see that where God tells him to write it down is just, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
It says, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Would that be, Amalek would be some sort of symbolism of someone or something every generation?
Could be. I don't know. I haven't really investigated that too much to know that if Amalek.
Because why would he
Yeah.
say Amalek from generation to generation?
Yeah.
Because there
I don't
could
know.
be more than one Amalek, I
Yeah.
guess, every generation.
Or
but
his descendants, or
his
that tribe.
descendants.
Yeah. So it could be. Yeah. Okay, so then 18, Jethro, which I love that name. Jethro comes in, and he is Moses. Do what? Yes. Yeah. He comes in, and this is Moses' father-in-law, and he comes to visit, essentially, and he sees that Moses is trying to take on all these cases. He's like hearing the cases of everybody's grievances and judge between different things, and he's essentially overwhelmed. And his father-in-law which I just love this because that's so orderly. I love the orderly, things, and to set a system for something. And so his father-in-law says, "Oh, you're going to wear yourself out. Let's do this, and let's break this up into groups, have people that are responsible, and let them be over the everyday type decisions, and the difficult decisions they can still bring to you." So I just like that. It just is to me, it's a kind of a pre-runner of our, legal system to some extent, without all the corruption, hopefully. But yeah, our system. Okay, so he brings some order to Moses's judging of the people. So then there's Mount Sinai, 19. They go on up to Mount Sinai and the Ten Commandments. God gives the Ten Commandments. Um, then it goes into the laws. There's a bunch of laws. I'm not going to get into all the laws. So we're focusing on more about the people and the things that they're doing. There's a lot of good stuff in there, though. I feel like there's so many things that's just you can pull out. Some talks about the feasts a little bit, but okay. So that's 19 through 24 is pretty much the laws and covenant. Okay, so then 25 starts with preparations for the tabernacle. So this is where he goes in and starts talking about all the things, and he's so detailed and so specific that I can get kind of bogged down in details, but when I kind of look at it from the big picture, I think, oh, how God cares about the details of everything, and he's big enough to do that. He can care about all my little piddly details of something that really doesn't matter that much in the long run, but he also cares, and he can handle the big things, too. So he cares about all the details, and they're important to him. Okay, so he goes through all the details on building the tabernacle, getting ready to build the tabernacle, making preparations for it. Then 32, let's see, yeah, so that's 25 through 31. You can, like I said, I feel like I'm just skipping over, but that's a lot of, if we were going to go through everything in the Bible, it would take us way too long for this class anyway. Okay, so what did I say, 30, where are we, 32 is the golden calf. So he's been up there, he's got all this information. He comes down with the tablets, and he finds that Aaron has given in to the people. They've gotten impatient. These people, they just, it's easy for us to say that. When we were there, I'd probably do the same thing. Who knows? but they get impatient. And the thing that gets me is Aaron just says, okay, let's do it. He doesn't, at least it doesn't say that he really puts up a fight, or stands firm on anything. He kind of just gives in. And I think, in fact, it's somewhere, I'm trying to remember where it is. Something about I put all the gold in the fire and out comes this calf or something like that. Trying not to take the blame, I think, is what it seems like. Okay, so he's so upset that he drops the Ten Commandments. He drops the stone tablets or throws them, I think, and Moses is so angry. And so he breaks the stone tablets. Okay, so then they leave 33, they leave Sinai, and then there's the part where Moses asks God that he wants to see his glory. And now so we'll start 33, like verse 7, 8, where is that? That as a man speaks face to 11. Verse 11. So 33, verse 11. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And I love that thought. Now, right after that, it goes on where he says he wants to see God's glory, and God says, no man can see my face and live. So it doesn't say that he sees him necessarily face to face, but he talks with him face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And I just, to me, that's just such a nice synopsis of what we have in God, that we have that direct. And, they didn't have, of course, obviously this was before Jesus, so they didn't have that direct, they still had to go through a priest to talk to God, so they couldn't. Anyway, I just thought that was neat. Okay, so then the intercession, Moses' intercession, he says, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest, God tells Moses. And then he said to him, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here, because he does not want to go without God, which he's smart. He's going to know that it's not. So then he asked him to show his glory, and God says, okay, essentially go. He puts him in the cleft of a rock, and he gets to see his back. So he sees his glory that way. But he protects him. Like the very last verse of 33, then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, and my face shall not be seen. So he protects him, just to think of the fact that he covers him with his hand until he passes by. So protecting him from himself. Protecting Moses from him. God is protecting Moses from himself, but from dying, because he is so righteous and holy, and that he couldn't see his face and live. Okay, so then Moses makes new tablets. We got this again, where he goes up on the mountain and stays 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain. And then we start in 35 where the tabernacle, this is where the tabernacle then is being made. And yeah, there's some Sabbath regulations. But yeah, the end of 35, they start the construction of the temple. And then we go through 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, where it's being made and all the details again. So they made preparations for it. Now they're actually making it. And then they're erecting, chapter 40, they erect the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. So now they've got this tabernacle to move around with them. And then the tabernacle is filled with the glory of God at the end of chapter 40. Okay, so that's Exodus in a flash. Leviticus we've got it broken down into like 3 laws about sacrifice and offerings. Just a lot of the laws, and this would be a great study to do. Just don't. It's not this one. There's a lot of laws. Aaron's sons are consecrated in chapter 8. So they're going to be the Aaron and his sons that comes from that line are going to be the ones that are going to be his priests and be able to go into the there are. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. And all the representation on the stones on the ephod that each have engraved the names of the tribes, and yeah, it's oh wow. Uh-huh. Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That visual, yeah. Yes. Yes. We went a few years ago we went to Florida on vacation, and we went to it was in I think it's in Orlando, but it was what was it called? I can't remember what it's called, but they've got it's set up as different spots of the Holy Land, and they've got it recreated where you can go in and you can see the Holy Land experience, maybe. Anyway, it's really worth. I thought it was worth. I think it's in Orlando. So we stayed in Orlando, so I think it's in Orlando, and it wasn't far, from there. So yeah, I think it's called the Holy Land Experience. It was really interesting. It's worth going to see. But they had just a part of like you walked in the tabernacle, and they had a little, so it's kind of like they have a little, certain times they have a little show where they, demonstrate, like a priest coming in, and they have this fake fire, there, and they have different things. So it was really interesting, and it kind of gives you, obviously it's not the whole, the whole tabernacle, but I think of that when I think of the tabernacle. I'm a visual person too. I need to see that, and that was really interesting to me to see. Yes. Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. But it reinforces the freedom we have in Jesus, to not have to follow all that Jesus, paid for all that. I mean, that he replaced, redeemed, all that we don't have to follow all that and all the other laws too and other things. But yeah, all the details and he brought in craftsmen, and it says, I can't remember where, but it says that God gave these gifts to these craftsmen and gave them wisdom and gave them the ability to create, yeah, yeah, and to create artistic designs. I think this was, yeah, I think this was in Exodus, somewhere in Exodus back. It was talking about how he gave the craftsmen the ability to create the artistic designs, and I thought that is so nice that God, because I'm not one that is just, I've never really been big on appreciating art. I don't know. I mean, it's not that I don't. It's not that I'm against it. I just don't get it. That's just me. I'm just real practical. It looks nice. And, yeah, I mean, I like things to be symmetrical. There are some things like that, but as far as just these, art pieces that are worth millions or whatever, I just don't get it. That's just me. And I thought, but God does. God gets that. He wanted people to be artistic. And so he has endorsed all those gifts that he's given everyone, to say, yes, this is important. And, you know, yes, yeah, that we do. That's okay. So sorry, y'all, we're running a little bit behind. No, it's okay. We might just want to go through half this tonight and go half next week. I don't know. Okay, so Aaron and his sons are consecrated. Then there's Aaron's sons in Leviticus 10 is one of those things, those stories that you may have heard, but where is it? Well, this is where it is. Where his sons offer, this one says unauthorized fire. I've heard it called strange fire. I don't know what else it's, y'all may have some other. This is Leviticus 10, verse 1, actually, where, what does it say? Wrong kind of fire, yeah. Nadab and Abihu, so the sons of Aaron. But so whatever they did something they didn't follow the rules. and it probably was not just a, oops, I was really intending to, knowing God, there was something to this, that it wasn't just, there was an intentional, probably unauthorized fire here. So essentially he puts them to death, and the people kind of learn their lesson here. So anyway, that's, he calls in two sons of Uzziah, Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, so he kind of replaces them. Well, no, he doesn't replace them. I'm sorry. He calls them in to carry them away. Anyway, so if that's one of those places, you may have one of those stories that's where it fits in. Okay, then more laws, punishments, and feasts. Pretty much the rest of Leviticus. Like I said, a lot of details, a lot of things, and that's where we get into so thankful that we're free from all those the laws. Okay, then let's see Numbers. So we're going to start. Let's look at Numbers. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I hate flipping through it and not pointing out stuff, but there's such good stuff. But that's okay. So now Numbers. In Numbers, we start off with census, and then tribes and duties. So more things that they're supposed to do. Aaron's blessing in 6:22. This is one you may have heard places, but if you're wondering where it is, that's where it is in Numbers 6:22 through 27. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them." So I love that, and we hear that a lot as a blessing, or as a what do you call it, like a send-off kind of thing, But so that's where that one is. So then, tabernacle dedication, and the Israelites leave Sinai. That's 7 through 10, and offerings at the tabernacle. The Passover celebrated in chapter 9. Let's see, where are we? Okay, so Numbers 11. We get it back into the people complaining again. So the people start complaining. Numbers 11, the very first verse, and the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. So then God is upset about that, and he ends up sending the 12 spies. Let's see, wait a minute. Yeah, that's 11 and 12, basically, where they're kind of complaining. And they even Miriam. So Miriam and Aaron then are essentially start complaining, oppose Moses. Chapter 12, sorry. So then, 13, so God sends the spies out. So he sends out 12 spies into the land to see what, come back and report, one from each tribe. So, but we only have, how many? Yep, yeah, exactly. 10 bad reports, 2 were good. And they spent 40 days, they spied out the land. So who were the 2 that came back with good reports, or the only 2 that didn't have a bad report? Do y'all remember? Caleb and Joshua. Very good. Yep, Caleb and Joshua. And this is also where it says that verse 16 of chapter 13, these are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun Joshua. So I hadn't picked that up. I've always heard him called Joshua, but I didn't realize his name was originally Hoshea, or however you say that. Or, yeah, mine says as H. I don't know. There's so many different. We're trying to take it from not an English even alphabet to translate it. So yeah, there's different ways of saying that. Okay, so let's see. So Caleb says go, and Joshua says go, and the people rebel. So chapter 14, the people rebel, and so then all except Caleb and Joseph will not get to go into the promised land. And that is 14, the end of 14. Where is that? Okay, yeah, 14:26 through 38. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, and he essentially says, "How long will this wicked congregation grumble?" But he goes on and he says, "As I live, declares the Lord, what you have said what you have said in my hearing, I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and all of your number listed in the census from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me, no one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb the son of something and Joshua the son of Nun." So God says, you're all going to wander around out here, and only those 2 are going to get to go into the land. So there's always, we see the consequences of actions always have consequences. So let's see, Korah's rebellion, then, let's see, 16. Some more laws in 15. And then Korah's rebellion, where they they rebel against God, and he has the earth swallow them up. Yeah, so that's that one, where Korah, and the ground opens up and swallows him and his all the people who belong to Korah and their goods. And then the people grumble again, and God sends a plague and kills like 14,700. That's at the verse 49, 50 of chapter 16. Okay, so then 17 is where Aaron's staff buds. So essentially they're complaining about saying who's greater, kind of. why do we're all righteous? Why do only the some get to be? Well, essentially then that was kind of what Korah's rebellion was about. Well, then in 17, let's see. Yeah. So then 17, where the Lord tells Moses to have all their chiefs, let's see, get from them staffs, one for each of their father's house, and all their chiefs according to their father's houses. 12 staffs, write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi, and put him in the tent of meeting. Essentially, which one will bud? Let's see, what is it? So Moses deposited the staff before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. Okay, verse 8. On the next day, Moses went into the tent of testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. Then Moses brought out all the staff. So this is where the staff buds, and he says to keep it as a sign. So we know that also was in the Ark of the Covenant, the budded staff. And yeah, I have to say, I wrote in here. It's funny because this was when I was going through last year when I was reading through the Bible and I was writing, so it's kind of humorous to me sometimes to see my notes. So on verse 12 of 17, all the people of Israel said to Moses, "Behold, we perish, we are undone, we're all undone. Everyone who comes near to the tabernacle of the Lord shall die. Are we all to perish?" And I had put, wah, wah, wah. I thought, what did I write there? But it is. It's so, but isn't that so like us? It's so easy for us to, or for me, it's so easy for me to sit back and judge and go, oh, they're so complainy. They're so spoiled. They're so whatever. But I think, oh, who knows? I would probably do the same thing. If it were me, I complain about less. I'm not out in the wilderness wandering and I still complain. Um, okay, so then there's priests' duties and cleansing in chapters 18 and 19. And then 20, Miriam dies in 20. And then that's the waters of Meribah. That's where he strikes the rock when he's supposed to speak to it. And we know also that he says, God tells him that because he struck the rock, that he was not going to go into the promised land either. So Moses is not, and that seems so harsh. It's just, but you think, God's ways are perfect. It's not up to us to judge. Plus, there's been so many things, but it says, in the Lord's verse 12, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. So it's not just about one little act of misobedience. It's that they didn't believe him in the eye and show that to the people and live that as an example. All right, so then Aaron dies, and this is in verse 22, starts in 22 through 29. It's also stated in Numbers and in Deuteronomy. Later in Numbers and then in Deuteronomy, but the main one that we're going to look at right here was verse 22. So, verse 22 of chapter 20. Too many numbers. So that's where he goes up on Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation. And God tells him, let Aaron, in verse 24, let Aaron be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land that I have given to the people of Israel, because you rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments and put them on Eleazar his son, and Aaron shall be gathered to his people and shall die there. So Moses did. So he transferred his garments to his son. Okay, so the bronze snake, 21. This was where the people were complaining again, so God sent fiery serpents. And again, and the serpents would bite the people and they would die. And then God says to make a bronze snake, and if you look at it when you're bitten, you won't die. So, we see so many things of just remembrance, things that we have to do to remember God, or things they had to do to remember God. And it's another, to me, it's another just warning to me to remember, set up things to remember.
Would this reflect back to when God threw Adam and Eve out and he talked about the serpent biting the ankle?
Could be. I haven't really thought about how that could fit.
Relative.
But that's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good. I was looking Okay, here. This isn't just the notes in this. This is the Jesus Bible that Numbers 21, 7 through 9. So this is just those couple of verses. The poisonous snakes, fiery serpents, represented God's judgment of the people for their proclivity to sin. The people cried out to Moses for help. God instructed Moses to craft a unique source of deliverance, an image of a snake placed on a pole and lifted up among the people. Those who looked at the symbol lived. Jesus used this image to instruct Nicodemus about the way he would provide true and lasting healing from the work of the enemy. Jesus said that those who look in faith upon his death on a cross will live. I like that. Okay, I like that. I hadn't read this note when I read through it. The Roman cross is far more grotesque image than a snake, as heinous criminals and scoundrels died horrific deaths in plain view of everyone. Soon Jesus said his death on a cross would alleviate the curse brought about by the sin in the garden. Those who look to him in repentance and faith will live in this life and in the age to come. So it doesn't exactly tie in, I guess, as the serpent, but it ties in as that the curse that was brought about from that time. Then if we look to Jesus, that alleviates the curse. But that's interesting too. I wonder how the serpent would fit in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, turned into a serpent. That'd be an interesting topic to look up and see if some things some people way smarter than me maybe have researched that. Okay, so then Balak, Balaam, and the angel. So Balak, this is Numbers 22 through 24. So Balak summons Balaam and essentially wants him to curse his enemies, to curse them. And God uses an angel to stand in front of the donkey that Balaam is riding, and to get him to get his attention to go the right way. So he tells him to go, but he is making sure Balaam knows. Well, first God tells Balaam not to go. That that Balak's trying to, get him to do something God doesn't want him to do, and then he finally tells him, okay, you can go, but he still has the donkey see the angel, but Balaam doesn't see the angel. The donkey sees the angel. Yeah, the donkey sees the angel. Balaam doesn't see the angel, and so Balaam's striking the donkey, trying to get the donkey to go, and the donkey won't go. I'm thinking, poor donkey. Finally, God, the angel of the Lord, went ahead. Where's the. Okay, verse 28. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey and said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have made a fool of me, I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you. And the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way? And he said, no. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, drawn sword in hand, and he bowed down and fell on his face. So he's trying to get his attention. So I just think that God uses anything. He can open the mouth of a donkey and have him talk. And so he's trying to get his attention and say, go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you. So then Balaam goes and he, let's see, he ends up blessing the people and not, and this is a beautiful, if you read through these oracle, there's some things like verse 19 of 23, God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said and will he not do it, or has he spoken and will he not fulfill it? I love God is just, it reminds us God is never changing, and he can use and will use no matter what it takes to get our attention. Okay, so so then Phineas and the Baal worship. We are running late tonight, y'all. So so chapter 25. So the Israelites essentially worship Baal. They sin with the Moabites and they start worshiping Baal. And Phineas, son of Eleazar, so the grandson of Aaron, is the one who kind of stands up and essentially kills the rebel and stands up for the right way. And if you, in Numbers 31, it tells us that Balaam, let's see, where is it? I saw it today. If you skip on over, 31:16. Behold, these on Balaam's advice caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor. So we know that somehow, even though that's right after Balaam's oracle, we know that somehow he was involved in convincing the people to worship Baal. Okay, so then there's the daughters of, I don't say that name, Z, the daughters of Z. Essentially, this is in Numbers 27. Essentially, he only had daughters. He didn't have any sons. So they come before Moses and say, hey, can't we get some inheritance too? Because shouldn't we have our... And so God says, yes, you're right. You do have the inheritance. Later on, we'll see that, and this is on down a little ways where it says Z's daughters marry within the father's clan. God tells, then later they come up and say, people are saying, hey, well, wait, if they marry outside, isn't the inheritance then going to be transferred? And God says, yeah, don't transfer it between the tribes, and tells the daughters to marry within their father's clan. So that's how the land will not be transferred between the tribes. So that's why that's important. So then Joshua is chosen to succeed Moses, Numbers 27. And we will get more into Joshua next week. And if y'all want to we could just stop there and do the rest of this next week. It's already running. I hate that we're running so late tonight. Okay. I should have thought about that when I had 2 columns to go through. Should have just stopped at Aaron's death and then gone. But yeah, we'll stop. We'll stop there and start this next week and get more into Joshua next week. All right. Well, I feel like I talked 90 miles an hour tonight. We'll pray and we'll get out of here and we'll see y'all next week. Well, we'll see you Saturday at the. Do you know about the tea that we're having Saturday? Okay, good. Good. So if you can, I just want to make sure you know. There's another little some invitations out there if you want to take one to anybody. All right, we'll pray and we'll get out of here. God, we thank you once again for just a wonderful night of opening your word and going through kind of the big picture of the history of your people and how you have brought about so many reminders. And you've given us so many reminders. You've given us your word as a reminder. And that we would just, I would ask that you would just continue to help us remember the reasons that we serve you out of love, and just that we would just stay on the right path, that we would just show your love to the world around us by our obedience to you and by the way we live. And God, we just ask that you would keep us safe as we go to our back to on our own ways tonight and to our homes, and keep us safe and bring us back this weekend. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.